welcome back and cheerio. Here we are with another matchup from the LTC Sunday Rebound. It's round 4, and we have Tasigur from round 1 facing Raph and Mikey from round 3, I guess it was. Round 2, actually, sorry. Interesting matchup. I would expect this to end up in Tasigur's favor. Raph and Mikey has a couple of toys to tackle the control matchups, things like defensive, grid, and Veil of Summer, and stuff like that. Some of those lists even play Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast in order to delay the Raph and Mikey cast by 1 turn and then just counter the counter spell. So, yeah, there's a bit of resistance, but not that much. Let's see what Tasigur brings up. I mean, on the contrary, apart from the Jace combo, the combo plan that the deck is putting to the board is not the fastest, which means you have to stall the game for a bit. Maybe if you can keep Raph and Mikey off of the board, then you can try to beat down your opponent with Tasigur, but it only works for as long as you have enough interaction that nothing from the Gruul deck ever comes down. I mean, it's not only Raph and Mikey. There could also be a Minsk and Boo and stuff waiting. So that's definitely something that you have to keep in mind. Strike It Rich is a card that I'm not sure we see too often. From what I remember from round 2, this was a bit of a different version compared to what we see usually. Here we have a Minsk and Boo. A beautiful one, by the way. That is the promo. I haven't seen that one in real life yet. And there's a Mana Leak. Probably Tasigur is trying to bait his opponent. He could think about paying for the Mana Leak, but that smells like a Spell Pierce, Force Spike, something like that. And he would lose a treasure token and a depletion land. So, yeah, maybe we get to see a Force Spike or something like that later on. Definitely a good decision to not read too much for the Minsk and Boo. Then again, it's a really, really good card. And Tasigur does not have too many answers for it. Very limited, in fact, I would say. Abrupt Decay does not destroy it. Long Goodbye doesn't destroy it either. And then, what are you left with? Sink into Stupor. Only a temporary solution. Now, there's actually, the more I think about it, I think there's not that much dealing with Planeswalkers. Maybe the CMC1 spell that you would have to pay 4 for, but I think most of the lists do not run that. Here we have a Shadow in the Warp. Really cool card. And there we see a Memory Lapse. I think Shadow in the Warp is something that you want to prevent from coming down, especially as a control player. Deals 2 damage for each non-creature spell played. So it offers some kind of an alternative clock. Not that it's super fast, but it also reduces the commander tax by 2. Or let's say it reduces the commander tax once, generally reducing the amount of mana by 2 generic, which means right now Raph and Mikey costs 5. And it's very likely that the Gruul player is trying to bring it down next turn, I would say. If it wasn't for the Memory Lapse. So we have to wait another turn. Surveil puts a command beacon into the graveyard. And I think Tasigur will do whatever is necessary to prevent that shadow from coming down. I see a Caplusion Forest as well as... Is that a Veil of Summer? Could be a Veil of Summer, I'm not entirely sure. The Forest and the last card. We will see. Oh, here we have the Fluty Flute. Shoutouts to Askeladden. The Disruptor Flute coming down, probably naming Raph. So now it costs 10. And the Shadow in the Warp would reduce it to 8 again. But I would assume this does not resolve. And there we see the Force Spike. Okay. Here we go, guys. So good choice to not pay the mana for the Minskin Boo earlier on. There is no counterspell for the Shadow. That's crazy. Okay. Yeah, that's rough. Can definitely cause some problems. This, however, is a card that can be handled with Heritage Reclamation, with Abrupt Decay. I think the new Witherbloom command also deals with permanents, with enchantments, sorry. Here we see a Sowing Myco spawn. Interesting inclusion. A bit of a different Tasigur, I would say. Also, the Disruptor Flute, I think, is a very good card, but you don't see it too often in those decks. Maze of If is an okay card, I would say. However, it does not prevent Raph and Mikey from triggering, which means you will get the creature. On the other side, there's a Hall of Gemstones. It's been a while that I've seen this card, but it's a common include. Another one of those cards that prevents your opponent from interacting. In the beginning of your upkeep, you just name green most likely. And then your opponent can't cast blue spells, for example. In response to the trigger, Tasigur plays a dress down, which means this turn, Raph and Mikey would not have haste, neither trample nor the triggered ability. But it looks like his opponent is planning on casting something else. So maybe they have drawn one of the targets. If I remember correctly, the deck has more than 2 targets. So if you have a look at MTG Top 8, the lists usually play Emrakul and the Worldspine Worm. Here we see the Worm coming down. This list is leaning a bit more into more targets, which means you do not have like a guaranteed win once Raph's trigger or Raph's and Mikey's triggers resolves. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think the all-in variant with 2 targets and yeah, more ramp, more fast mana, more ways to protect your commander from coming down. Things like City of Solitude are also really, really good interactions or protections against control or whatever your opponent is trying to do. And here we have a how was it called? Something with Rex. I remember this card from the Phyrexian set. It can't be countered, trample, haste, something like this. Lots of words on a green card. On the other hand, there is a Long Goodbye returned. Okay. Yeah, that is more or less a useless card. As we said earlier, Raph and Mikey is rated with, which is, yeah, probably the right choice. Then again, there's the castle in combination with the battle. No, it's not called Battle Land, but the one that sacrifices itself for 2 mana. Havenwood Battlegrounds, I think it's called. So there might be a world in which Raph and Mikey comes down again. Even if not, you still have to deal with that Worldspine Worm. And since we know Sultai does not have any exile effects, which means if there's some effect, would be great to go for Damnation, for example. But Tasigur can't really go for a Damnation because it would mean that the Worldspine Worm produces 3/5/5 Worm tokens. That's a good side effect. If it would be any other creature without a die trigger, you could easily go for the Damnation and stabilize again. But it also means that you tap out against another Raph and Mikey cast, so yeah, it's a bit tricky. Sawing Microspawn, definitely an interesting one here. Not so sure if the lands toolbox is good enough in order to support that. But I like the fact when people are trying out different cards, you don't always have to go on MTG Top 8 and just pick the next best list. You can also go ahead and include some of your own cards and ideas and try to make them work. That's what makes Magic interesting, I guess. And these days it feels like not enough people are doing that. But, it's always a very subjective thing what you find entertaining and whatnot. Some people just want to play whatever deck is performing. They don't have the time to invent or tune lists, so I get behind that. We have a cryptic command stepping down the board. That is, however, only a temporary solution, I fear. Yeah, so 3, there's a talisman. And there is a Sky Shroud claim. Okay. Yeah, I think early iterations of the deck did play that. However, it's rather slow, I would say. Okay, and there is like looking at the top card, and the Tasigur player doesn't find any solution, and he says, "Well, we can go over to game 2," and I try my luck again. So, starting with a Marsh Flats, a Castle Garen Brick on the other side. That's an inclusion that I like a lot. I think most of the lists are running it. Basically reduces the commander's cost by 1. And with the help of all these ramp artifacts and thieving songs and Jeska's wills and whatsoever, you get down your commander quite quickly. I mean, both of those spells I just mentioned don't really help you to activate the Garen Brick unless you have a Firelit Thicket on board, a filter land, because the activation costs 2 green. Here we have a Farseek. In response, Lorien revealed. What does it reveal? Probably a surveil land. It's the Hedge Maze. And of course, a commercial district on the other side. We are playing in the era of surveillance. Even aggressive decks get to search for those lands. They're just too good. You cannot miss out on those. Here we have what seems to be an error. Yeah. Okay. He was planning to play a Consider, and that's where the Surveil comes from. The Lorien revealed would certainly not put the card onto the battlefield. That would be a very, very powerful spell, and we would see it in many more decks. So now it comes down, followed by Tasigur. And that seems to be a timing window that is fine. You should not expect too much interaction coming from Raph and Mikey towards Tasigur. And now you can beat your opponent for 4 turn by turn, leaving up some interaction. Basalt Monolith coming down. And yeah, I mean, the question is, do you have something else to cast? Or do you just try to resolve a Raph and Mikey through potential counter magic? I mean, I think there are at least 3 cards left in Tasigur's hand, so I don't want to say difficult decision, but an insist is a card, or even 5, sorry, not only 3. Insist is a card that makes life a bit easier here. If it wasn't for the Veil, oh no, never mind, the counterspell, sorry. But there is a Veil of Summer in hand, right? Yeah. To the very left. So, with another mana, he could have decided to... Oh, actually, I think he could have still cast his commander, but he seems to be a bit afraid of another interaction spell. If you tap the Basalt Monolith, in addition to the Castle Garen brick, you save 1 mana. And the mana that you saved, you could spend for the Veil of Summer in case another counterspell comes down. And here we have the Veil of Summer into the Archmage's Charm. That's pretty good. Pretty solid. Revealing a weird Eldrazi from Modern Horizons 3, I guess. I have no idea how this card is called, but it has a bunch of keywords, menace, lifelink, whatsoever. I remember a few of them. I think it has ward, pay 7 life, which is absurd. Then again, the card costs 7 mana. So, yeah. I'm not sure. There should be a Damnation. That's not the case. And, oh, there's even Emrakul in hand. We see the handshake, and that's it. Yeah, neither Fury nor Pyrokinesis do the job against Tasigur, but that was enough to win the game. And we have a clean 2-0 from Raph and Mikey. That was a cool one, a quick one. Thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. And we will see each other in the next match.